My name is Trish Valdez and I am 32 years old. I have always believed that order is a form of mercy you grant yourself before the world decides to be cruel. I check expiration dates on milk cartons 3 times before buying. I keep a spreadsheet for my skincare routine color-coded by morning and night. My Outlook calendar looks like a stained glass window of carefully blocked time. Chaos has never been something I ride out. Chaos is something I preemptively suffocate. That's how I built my career, how I built my marriage, how I built a life that until one Tuesday evening looked so stable from the outside that people assumed it had always been that way. Mark Valdez, my husband of 5 years, was the only variable I ever allowed myself to believe I could manage without micromanaging. He was 34, charming, in a slightly rumpled way, good at sales because he sold confidence more than product, and just disorganized enough that people mistook it for authenticity. We had been together 7 years total. We owned a colonial house in a suburb designed to signal success without arrogance. Sensible luxury cars, a joint savings account we referred to as the nursery fund, even though we hadn't yet decided when we would actually use it. Stability curated and displayed like a showroom. It was Taco Tuesday. Specifically Taco Tuesday because Mark loved routines as long as he didn't have to be the one planning them. He was in the shower, music playing faintly through the bathroom door. I was in the kitchen, scraping leftover ground beef into a Tupperware container, the smell of cumin and lime still hanging in the air. His phone sat on the granite island, plugged into the charger screen face up. It buzzed. I don't usually look at his phone. I'm not the snooping type, not because I'm morally superior, but because I believe that once you feel the need to snoop, the relationship is already hemorrhaging. But the screen lit up right next to the salsa bowl, and I saw the preview without trying. Ashley client, do not delete. Can't stop thinking about last night. My body went still in a way that wasn't panic. It was more like my brain refused to accept the image at first, as if blinking might rewrite it. Client. Why was a client using the double heart emoji? Why was a client thinking about last night? Mark had told me he was at a networking dinner with guys from the regional office. I set the spatula down carefully, wiped my hands on a paper towel, and walked to the phone. Mark has never been smart about security. His passcode is the last 4 digits of his social security number. I typed it in. The thread opened. Ashley, you were amazing. Ashley, I miss your hands already. Ashley, when can you get away from her? Her. Capital H. Me reduced to a pronoun in someone else's fantasy. I scrolled up. 3 months of messages, photos, selfies in his car, my car, the Audi. I let him use when his was in the shop. Explicit descriptions of hotel rooms I recognized from our credit card statements, all filed neatly under business expenses. Napa weekends. Tuesday sushi dinners that suddenly made sense. The adrenaline hit, then sharp and clarifying, like stepping into an ice bath. I didn't feel hysterical. I felt focused. There were a dozen ways I could have reacted. I could have marched into the bathroom and screamed. I could have thrown the phone into the toilet. I could have packed a bag and left. But all of those options were messy, emotional, and emotions cost you leverage in a divorce. The phone buzzed again. A typing bubble appeared. Ashley, hello, Marky. I almost laughed, almost gagged. I took a slow breath and typed back my thumb steady. Me as Mark, me too. The reply came instantly. Ashley, I feel guilty though. Me as Mark don't. You know she doesn't appreciate me like you do. Ashley didn't hesitate. Exactly. We talked about this. I stared at the screen, then typed the sentence that changed everything. Me as Mark, you're right. I think it's time. A pause. Then time for what? Me as Mark to come clean. I can't live a lie anymore. Let's tell my wife together. The typing bubble vanished, reappeared, vanished again. Ashley. What? No. Marky, you said we were waiting, Ashley. You can't just tell her, Ashley. She'll ruin everything, Ashley. You said she's unstable. Unstable. That was new. Creative even. I watched the messages pile up as panic took over. Ashley, Mark, stop. Ashley. Please don't do this. Ashley. Pick up the phone. The phone started ringing. Ashley client, do not delete. I didn't answer. I let it ring while I went into his settings, turned off Face ID, and changed the passcode to our anniversary date, something he had already forgotten once and would never guess now. I took screenshots of everything and sent them to my email. Then I deleted the sent messages from the thread so it looked untouched on his end and archived the chat. The shower turned off. The glass door slid open. "Babe," Mark called. "Did you see my towel?" The phone buzzed again. Ashley was calling back. This time I answered and put it on speaker. I didn't say a word. I walked toward the bathroom. Mark Ashley's voice came through, high-pitched and frantic. "Why are you texting me like that? You can't tell her. You said we'd wait until after bonus season so she couldn't take your money." "Mark, answer me." Mark stepped out of the bathroom, water dripping from his hair, a towel wrapped around his waist. He froze when he saw the phone in my hand. Mark Ashley shrieked, "Are you there? Please tell me you didn't tell the psycho." His face drained of color so fast it was almost impressive. I smiled, not warmly, not cruelly, just precisely. "Hi, Ashley," I said, my voice calm, professional, the tone I use in board meetings. "Mark is a little tied up right now. He's wearing a towel, but he's right here. Did you want to repeat the part about bonus season?" Silence. Thick, heavy silence. Then the line went dead. Mark stared at me like I was a stranger who had wandered into his house. "I can explain." "I'm sure you can," I said. "But first, you're going to pack a bag. You have 10 minutes before I lock the doors." He didn't move. 9, I added. "And Mark, if you try to take the PlayStation, I will call your mother." That did it. He scrambled. I walked downstairs, poured myself a glass of the Cabernet we were saving for our 5th anniversary, and sat on the couch. I transferred exactly half of our joint savings into my personal account, down to the penny. I removed him as an authorized user on my credit card. I changed the password to our joint email. 7 minutes later, he came down with a duffel bag and terror written across his face. "Please," he started. "She's just a client." It meant nothing. "She seems to think it meant bonus season," I said, holding out my hand. "The key." He hesitated. "Where am I supposed to go?" Ashley sounded eager, I replied. "Maybe she has a couch." He dropped the key into my palm. I locked the door behind him, set the alarm, and only then, only when everything was secured, did I let myself cry. I cried for exactly 14 minutes. Then I washed my face, applied my night cream, and went to sleep in the middle of the bed. The next morning, I woke up before my alarm, not because I was anxious, but because my body is trained to respond to unfinished systems. Mark's side of the bed was empty, the sheets untouched, the indentation already fading. I lay there for a moment, listening to the house settle to the unfamiliar quiet that felt less like loss and more like reclaimed territory. Then I got up, made coffee, and opened my laptop. People like to imagine that moments like this are followed by sobbing fits and dramatic phone calls. They aren't, at least not for me. They're followed by lists. I opened a new document and titled it, "Next Steps, No Punctuation, No Emotion, Just Execution." By 8:07 a.m., I had called a divorce attorney. His name was Victor Vance, though he insisted everyone call him Mr. Vance. He charged $450 an hour and spoke in a gravelly monotone that suggested he had long ago run out of patience for theatrics. When I explained what had happened, he didn't interrupt. He listened, asked for dates, timelines, and whether I had documentation. When I told him I had screenshots, bank statements, and a preliminary ledger of shared assets, he paused for half a second. "Good," he said. "That saves us time." At work, I was efficient to the point of unnerving my team. I resolved a supply chain delay, approved 3 vendor contracts, and rescheduled a quarterly review, all while my phone sat face down on my desk. I didn't need to look at it to know Mark would start texting soon. Men like him don't disappear quietly. They orbit looking for gravity. The first text came at 10:42 a.m. "Mark, I need my suits. I have a meeting." I replied without hesitation. "Me. They're in a garbage bag on the porch. It's raining." There was a pause then. "Mark, you can't lock me out of my own house. This is illegal." "Me, you left voluntarily. I have ring footage. Please direct further communication to my attorney." That was when the entitlement surfaced fully like an infection breaking through skin. "Mark. You're being petty. Mark. I'm willing to forgive you for the phone stunt if we can talk like adults." I read that one twice just to be sure I hadn't misinterpreted it. He was willing to forgive me for catching him. The audacity was almost impressive. I didn't respond. By noon, Mr. Vance had reviewed my materials and called me back. "We're in a no-fault state," he said. "The infidelity matters emotionally, but not legally, unless we can prove dissipation of marital assets." "I know," I said. "I'm working on that." "Good," he replied. "Because based on what you've sent, I suspect you'll find more." He was right. That evening after dinner, leftover risotto I barely tasted. I became something between a forensic accountant and an archaeologist. I pulled credit card statements, Venmo histories, Uber receipts, hotel confirmations. Patterns emerged. Tuesday sushi dates that lined up perfectly with his supposed late meetings. Napa weekends billed as conferences. Gifts categorized as client entertainment. I cross-referenced everything. By midnight, I had a number. In the last 6 months alone, Mark had spent roughly $14,500 of our joint money on Ashley. That didn't include what he'd hidden better, the things he hadn't been sloppy about. That was just what he'd been arrogant enough to assume I'd never check. The text continued. Mark, my mom says you're overreacting. Mark, we should go to counseling. Mark, you're throwing away 7 years. I muted the thread and went to bed. The next escalation came 2 days later while I was at work. The receptionist buzzed my office. There's a young woman here to see you, she said. She says it's personal. I pulled up the lobby camera feed. It was Ashley. She looked younger in person, maybe 24, wearing a beige trench coat that was too expensive to be accidental. She clutched a Starbucks cup like it was an anchor. I considered having security escort her out. Instead, curiosity won. Send her to conference room B, I said. When I walked in, she didn't stand. She looked up at me with wide, watery eyes, already arranged for sympathy. Mrs. Valdez, she began. Trish, I corrected. What do you want, Ashley? She took a breath. You need to stop bullying Mark. I almost smiled. Almost. He's staying at a Motel 6, she continued. It's disgusting. He has allergies. He's allergic to accountability, I said, not motels. Her composure cracked for a second, then reassembled into something practiced. We're in love, she said. He told me how cold you are, how you track his spending, control his schedule. You treated him like an employee. I leaned back in the chair. And yet I said lightly, he let me pay for your hotel rooms. Her hand went to her wrist instinctively. The bracelet glinted under the fluorescent lights. That's Cartier, I said. Love style. He bought that with a Visa ending in 4589. That's a joint card, which means I technically own 50% of that bracelet. Her face drained of color. You're crazy, she said. No, I replied. I'm solvent. There's a difference. She swallowed. My dad can't know. There it was. The truth, finally. Your dad, I repeated. Mark's biggest client. She nodded, eyes shining. He'd pull the contract. Mark would lose his job. And you'd lose your lifestyle, I said quietly. She flinched. I haven't called him, I continued. But Mr. Vance is filing the divorce petition on Monday. Since Mark spent marital assets on you, you'll be named in the proceedings. We'll need to depose you. A deposition, she whispered. Yes, I said. Under oath. Public record. Your father has Google alerts, doesn't he? She stood abruptly, chair scraping. You can't. I can, I said. Unless you return every item he bought you with my money. By Friday. 5 p.m. I hate you, she hissed. Get in line, I replied, checking my watch. You have 48 hours. She left shaking. That night my phone rang. Linda Valdez. What have you done to my son? She demanded. I closed my eyes. Good evening, Linda. She launched into a tirade about forgiveness, about men having needs, about how if I were more attentive, none of this would have happened. She reminded me helpfully that my own father had cheated and my mother had stayed. I am not my mother, I said and hung up. An alert pinged on my phone moments later. Attempted charge $4,500. Luxury escapes Cabo. Declined. I forwarded the screenshot to Mr. Vance. Subject line, more evidence. I slept better than I had in weeks. Friday arrived with the kind of calm that only comes before something either resolves or explodes. I took a half day off work, not because I needed the time, but because I wanted control over the clock. I arrived at Mr. Vance's office at 4:30, 15 minutes earlier than necessary, and sat in the waiting room with a paper cup of coffee that tasted faintly like regret and burnt plastic. The magazines on the table were from 2019. I flipped through one anyway, not reading, just occupying my hands. At 4:55, the glass door opened. Ashley walked in without the trench coat. She was wearing gray sweatpants, an oversized hoodie, and sunglasses that were far too large for her face. She looked smaller somehow, like someone who had misjudged a gamble and was now recalculating their odds in real time. She didn't look at me. She walked straight to the receptionist's desk and dropped a shopping bag from Target onto the counter with a thud that echoed louder than necessary. Here, she said. Her voice was flat, defeated. Greta. Mr. Vance's paralegal, a woman with the posture of a retired drill sergeant and the soul of a saint, opened the bag without comment. One by one, the items emerged. The red Cartier box. The bracelet inside coiled and gleaming. The Dyson Airwrap still wrapped carefully, as if Ashley had hoped presentation might earn her mercy. A Balenciaga clutch I hadn't even known existed. Good catch, Greta muttered, making a note. We'll inventory this against the records. Ashley finally turned toward me. She pulled off her sunglasses. Her eyes were swollen-rimmed red mascara smudged beneath them. He broke up with me, she said quietly. I raised an eyebrow. When? Yesterday, she replied. After I told him I had to give the stuff back. He said I was ungrateful, that I let you win. He called me a liability. There it was, the final demotion. From fantasy to inconvenience. I thought he loved me. She whispered the words, sounding foreign even to her own ears. He loved how you made him feel, I said not unkindly. There's a difference. She swallowed. You're not going to call my dad. I promised I wouldn't call him, I said. And I won't. She nodded relief, flickering across her face like a match struck briefly in the dark. Then she turned and left without another word. I felt a twinge of something that might have been pity. It lasted less than a second. 24 is young, but it's old enough to know that sleeping with a married man comes with consequences. I took the bag of luxury goods home with me. They sat in my living room like artifacts from a life Mark had been running parallel to ours. I cataloged them, photographed them, and locked them away. They would be sold and folded neatly into the legal fund. Everything has a place if you're disciplined enough. Saturday morning, I was halfway through my second cup of coffee when the doorbell rang. Not a polite ring. An aggressive, sustained assault on the chime. I checked the ring camera. Mark, Linda, and a locksmith. I didn't open the door. I spoke through the intercom. Mark, you are trespassing. Leave. It's my house, too, he shouted, his voice already frayed. My name is on the deed. I have a locksmith. I looked at the locksmith on the screen. He looked uncomfortable, shifting his weight like a man who had been misled. Sir, I said calmly, addressing him directly. My name is Trish Valdez. I am the sole occupant of this property at the moment. If you drill that lock, I will call the police and report a break-in. The locksmith glanced at Mark. You said you lost your keys, he said. You didn't say she was inside. Just do it, Linda shrieked. She was wearing a fur coat. In May. I'm not getting involved in this, the locksmith said, already packing up his tools. Mark grabbed his arm. I'll pay you double. Don't touch me, the locksmith snapped, pulling away and heading for his van. That was when Mark lost what little restraint he had left. He picked up a decorative rock from the garden, the one I painted last summer, absurdly cheerful, and hurled it at the living room window. Glass shattered. The alarm screamed to life, piercing and relentless. Open the door, Mark yelled. I didn't. I dialed 911. My estranged husband is attempting to break into my home, I said evenly. He just smashed a window. I am alone and afraid for my safety. The police arrived in 4 minutes. In that time, Mark managed to clear the broken glass and wedge himself halfway through the window, one leg inside, one leg out. Linda cheered him on from the lawn like it was a sporting event. 2 officers approached, hands on their holsters. Sir, step away from the window. It's my house, Mark screamed. Sir, step away now. He tried to scramble fully inside. One officer grabbed his ankle and yanked. Mark fell backward into the mulch with a sound that was almost anticlimactic. They cuffed him. Linda went berserk. She swung her tiny sequined purse at one of the officers. Don't touch him. Ma'am, step back, the officer warned. Arrest me then, she shrieked. This is communism. So they did. I watched from behind the broken window as my husband and my mother-in-law were placed into separate squad cars. Mark looked up at me, eyes wild. You planned this, he screamed. You manipulated me. I sipped my coffee. I documented you, I corrected quietly, though he couldn't hear me. When it was over, I called Mr. Vance. Mark was arrested for attempted breaking and entering, I said. His mother assaulted a police officer. There was a pause. Then, to my surprise, he chuckled. Well, he said that simplifies Monday. I boarded up the window that afternoon, swept up the glass, and showered. As the sun set, my phone buzzed with an unknown number. Hey, this is Ashley's dad. My stomach dropped just for a moment. She told me everything. The message continued. I'm sorry for her behavior. She's been cut off and sent to live with her aunt in Ohio. As for Mark, we're reviewing our accounts. There appear to be discrepancies. Discrepancies. That word would change everything. I set the phone down and exhaled slowly. Somewhere, a system had finally stopped compensating for Mark's incompetence. By Sunday morning, the word discrepancies had settled into my thoughts like a loose thread you can't stop tugging. I hadn't contacted Ashley's father. I hadn't even considered it, which meant this wasn't retaliation, it was exposure. Mark hadn't just been reckless with my trust. He had been careless with someone far more dangerous, the man who signed his commission checks. I replied once briefly, carefully. I appreciate you letting me know. I'm sorry it came to this. The response came almost immediately. Don't be. You saved me a lot of money in the long run. We'll be handling Mark. I stared at the screen longer than necessary, then locked my phone and set it face down on the table. There was nothing more to say. When people like Mark finally meet someone who doesn't need them, the fallout is swift and unsentimental. Mark spent that night in county holding. Linda made bail. Mark did not. I refused to pay it, and according to Mr. Vance, Mark had already maxed out his remaining credit cards, trying to book a vacation and fund his disappearing act. The entitlement had finally run headfirst into a concrete wall, literally. Monday morning arrived with the efficiency of fate. Mr. Vance filed the divorce petition and the motion for exclusive use of the marital home. The police report from the weekend was already attached. Attempted breaking and entering, resisting arrest, property damage. A neat stack of evidence that spoke louder than any emotional testimony ever could. That restraining order hearing Mr. Vance said over the phone, "It's not even a question. He won't be allowed within 500 feet of you or the house." I thanked him and hung up. I felt lighter, not happy, not relieved, just unburdened, like I had finally put down something heavy I'd been carrying for years without realizing it. 2 days later, the call came. Mark had been fired. Not laid off, not let go. Fired. Ashley's father hadn't just reviewed the accounts. He had audited them. Mark had been submitting expense reports to the company for client dinners and trips, then paying for those same expenses with our joint funds and pocketing the reimbursements. Double dipping. Over 2 years, it added up to nearly $20,000. Embezzlement. When Mr. Vance told me, he didn't sound surprised. This explains his confidence, he said. Men who cheat in one area usually cheat everywhere. Criminal charges followed quickly. Mark was offered a plea deal to avoid prison time, probation restitution, and a felony charge that would sit on his record like a permanent stain. His priorities shifted overnight. He no longer cared about winning the divorce. He needed money for a criminal defense attorney. Leverage evaporated. The divorce itself was almost anticlimactic. Because Mark was facing fraud charges, his negotiating power was non-existent. We documented the dissipated marital assets, deducted the money he'd spent on Ashley, the cost of the broken window and legal fees. I kept the house. I had to buy out his share of the equity, but after everything was calculated, it amounted to pennies compared to what he'd taken from me. I refinanced in my own name. I kept 100% of my retirement account. He liquidated most of his to pay restitution and attorney fees. Alimony was never even discussed. Technically, he owed me money. I framed the judgment and hung it in my home office. It felt appropriate. 6 months later, the house is quiet in a way that feels intentional, not lonely. The silence isn't heavy anymore. It's curated, luxurious. Mark pled guilty to a lesser charge and is currently on probation. He lives in a basement apartment with a roommate he found online and works at a car rental agency near the airport. He texted me once from a new number. I miss the dogs. I have a cat. He never noticed. Linda sends handwritten letters about sin and judgment. I return them unopened. Ashley is in Ohio, according to social media. I looked once. She works at a bakery now and posts Bible verses under photos of sourdough. Her influencer dreams appear to be on hold. I sold the luxury items she returned and used the money to fund a solo trip to Italy. I ate pasta, drank wine, and didn't check the expiration date on a single thing. Somewhere between Florence and Rome, I realized something important. Control is an illusion. You can color code your life, track every penny, manage every system, but you can't control people. Mark felt entitled to a life he didn't earn. Ashley felt entitled to a man who belonged to someone else. Linda felt entitled to dictate my future. I didn't destroy them. I just stopped propping them up. Last night, my phone buzzed. A text from a man I met in Italy. His name is Luca. He's an architect. Thinking about dinner last night, he wrote, "The pasta was almost as good as the company." I smiled and typed back, "I agree. Next time I'm cooking." The sun is setting now. My spreadsheets are closed. Justice wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It was paperwork, a locked door, and letting people face the consequences of their own choices. And it tastes like vintage Cabernet.